Top 5 schools at the ACC can't lose. So, look, there are, there's 15 schools in the ACC right now, right? 15, 14, whatever there are, 14. But there's 5 that hold all the power.
Can't be odd, can it?
Well, I guess I'm counting Notre Dame in that, and because they play 4 games a year against the ACC, so Notre Dame's in that. Notre Dame, obviously they're not football in there.
Paul, now you got me doubting how many teams are in the ACC.
There's 15 in basketball. Because of Notre Dame.
So then there's 14.
So there's 14 in
football. Yeah, so there's 14. Yeah, so there's 15 in basketball. That's why I said there's 15. But yeah, there's 15 in basketball. Number 5, UVA. Look, they have not had success. They've had success recently in basketball, won the national championship in 2019, obviously, and Tony Bennett's done a great job managing to win games without scoring many points. Because they don't. They win every game like 51 to 40, 43.
They're a damn good team, though.
Good.
That's the one that beat Tech, right?
Yeah. But Virginia, in football, look, they might have a nice upswing this year. I really love the Tony Elliott hire for them. But I do think that when you come to when it comes to academics, endowment, Virginia's a big state, all of that. Virginia has a ton of value, especially to someone like the Big Ten. Like, they're a match with the Big Ten if they decided to expand. I'm actually kind of surprised, and maybe it was just because Maryland was so ready to go that Virginia wasn't the one when they did it the first time and came into the ACC. But Virginia, to me, makes a ton of sense, or it has more power than people may realize.
Yeah, I think this when I first started thinking about it would be like just a classic SEC fit, just in terms of like the state schools and that whole part of the country. But then I started seeing, a lot of talk about them in the Big Ten and how they would fit into a package and all of that jazz. I do love the Tony Elliott hire. I mean, they're going to have a great quarterback, Brennan Armstrong, coming back, so that's really going to help them out tremendously. But, and Elliott, it's going to be fun to see these new coaches, kind of like a Brent Venables as well at Oklahoma, kind of these guys getting their starts and running their programs. But yeah, I don't really know where they're viewed because, if you read Twitter, I mean, who knows what's true and what's not, but they seem to be a team that could provide value, but not to the extent that they're worth adding and devaluing. Like, they don't bring more extra added value, but in terms of a lot of the things that you look for academically and location and things like that, yeah, absolutely, they'd be a great fit for somebody.
Yeah. Number 4, and I know this is probably further down the list than most people realize, but Miami. Miami, it's kind of interesting. I was talking to a guy this morning who was here, and he was asking me about this, and I said, what's funny about Miami is after they won the national title in 2001, they got hit with the Nevin Shapiro scandal, and they kind of backed off of everything. They kind of made the organizational decision that we're not going to be as aggressive with football, and then they kind of, sloughed through some hires, and Mark Richt was a great hire for them, but had health problems and had to leave, and so they've kind of been in this dead zone for a long time. And they're also a small private school. That's what people maybe not realize about it nationally that don't know about the school. The school is in the city of Miami, which is gigantic, but the school itself is a small private school.
Is there any school that has a different image from actuality than Miami?
Probably not. So because of what they were able to do in the 80s and 90s and 01, people think of them one way than they actually are as an organization. Now, a lot of the things that Nevin Shapiro did or that they did and got put on probation for are now legal. So now instead of having to reinvent the playbook, they can just go back to what they were doing and be Miami again. So there's a lot of money flowing in. They're in a gigantic TV market. They're a gigantic brand name. They have value to anyone that they would add, especially now that the rules have changed, that they can figure out how to make their football team successful again.
If they don't get back to the mountaintop in the next few years, and I don't know that they ever are. I mean, between Cristobal coming back home and scooping him from Oregon and the big get that he was to basically, just being able to be Miami without any of the rules in place that's barred you from being able to just blatantly and openly do that, even though they still did in some cases. What was the hot tub commitment from the Dallas Carter kid? The excess.
Jesse Armstead,
Armstead, but it's the excess and all. They can embrace that now.
Luther Campbell doesn't have to pretend anymore.
Right. Just do whatever. I mean, basically, So, I mean, this is, of all the schools that are, standing to benefit the most from NIL. I mean, there's a lot of them, but Miami is one of the top, no doubt about it. I mean, it completely changes their trajectory, and they could still be, a powerful school regardless of if NIL was going to be passed or not. But between getting Cristobal back home and NIL hitting at the same time and realignment, I mean, they've really got a window right here that's a prime window for them. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Miami market and just the tradition and the history and all that is going to be coveted by a lot of people.
Yeah. Number 3, Clemson. Clemson, I have them at 3 here just for the simple fact that they're kind of new money. That's it. That's the only reason. They are a juggernaut in football. They're not really great in a whole lot of other things athletically, but not like they are in football. But Dabo Swinney has put them on the map again. They had some history back in the 80s, and then they went through a time of being, at best, a really good team, but not great. Now they're a pretty great program, and as long as they, rebound from last year where, when you lose all 5 of your offensive linemen, you're probably going to have a dip no matter how good you were the year before. So we'll see. And plus the quarterback's got to play better, whoever that winds up being at Clemson. But Clemson is valuable because they're a national brand now. Like you heard Tim Brando earlier say, on and off the field, they've made themselves really, really recognizable. People know what that paw is, and that's a big deal. Now, yeah, there's some political things that would happen in the SEC, but I do think this. Anybody that doesn't want their in-state rival in the SEC now, so South Carolina and Florida would jump into this category, after Texas came in last year, doesn't really have a leg to stand on because A&M didn't want that, and everybody voted against them. So
And I don't think probably Arkansas did either.
Yeah.
So
Missouri probably didn't.
Missouri, yeah. I mean, absolutely. But, yeah, with Clemson, I mean, they're an automatic. If the Big 12 could grab them right now, you'd grab them. If the Pac-12 could swing that somehow, they would do so. But, yeah, I mean, to me, that's the brand that's next up now. What's interesting is post-Dabo. You know, what is that? Because so much is based off him, and I know they had some tradition prior to that. But, like, the Clemson now is the Dabo Clemson that built off of, the 80s and all of that. But, yeah, I mean, it's remarkable to see growing up watching college football where they're very respectable and notable and all that, but to where they are now or where they have been here recently, it's quite the journey. And it would not shock me to see Dabo Swinney retire like Bob Stoops early because he doesn't care for this new era of college football. It's not his bag. He's not, he's not going to fight against what he needs to make the team better, but he doesn't like it. And he's been very vocal about that. Yeah, well, and he's got a little less vocal because every time he talks about it, it goes wrong for him. Yeah. There's a lot of negative backlash. Yeah. But they're set up very well with him or without him. Obviously, if he were to do what you said, then there would be plenty of candidates lining up because they've seen now what you can do there, how you can maximize all that's available to you. And yeah, they're really strong, and they would be really strong for whoever could scoop them up. But I think that's what would be interesting is that as we're talking with Brando about about the Big Ten or the SEC, if that came down to it in a little courtship, it would be really interesting to see that, and we might see that pretty soon. Number 2, Florida State. Look, I said this, only put them at 2 because their TV ratings are still really good. So you can put Florida State on against anybody, and you're going to get ratings. And so that Notre Dame game last year that they really should have won, but they almost pulled off, was a huge ratings. And Florida State has been mediocre at best, if not downright crappy the last few years, but they still have a draw and could be big if you give them resources. So it's a brand that could resuscitate itself very easily given the resources you would have in an SEC. They can, but they need to do it. Yeah, they can't keep dragging this whole resurgence out and then go through another coaching search if Mike Norvell's not the one that works out. So this will be a really interesting year for them to see kind of how far along they are. Yeah, it's a huge year for Mike Norvell. Number 1, North Carolina. The best basketball brand in the country. A football team that can get good. Look, they got Mac Brown right now. They can get good if they really focus on it. And an educational endowment that rivals most everybody but probably Stanford. They have a ton of money. It's a great, great school academically. Ironically, they are the one school in the ACC that might be the best academic school, but they also had the largest academic scandal in the school, so that's kind of weird. But UNC, I do think that UNC fits the Big Ten. I think they probably fit the SEC as well, but if the Big Ten wanted to go east, then UNC makes a lot more sense than anybody else in this list, and I'm sure they would love to have that money, and the Big Ten academic pool of resources would really fit them well. Yeah, they got a lot of major markets, whether you think that matters or it doesn't. But I was looking through the top 50 markets or whatever, and it's amazing how many just little conglomerates of Greenville, Asheville, Greensboro, and then there's Charlotte, there's Winston-Salem. There's like 7 different markets within North Carolina. I didn't really realize that, but
Tobacco Row.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, they're well positioned. I think you could argue as far as like boom. Them and Clemson would probably be the two. Like if Clemson jumped tomorrow or North Carolina jumped tomorrow, I think they'd probably have the biggest wow factor. But yeah, they're definitely arguably number one and one of the most coveted for reasons more than just football related. Absolutely.
All right, Paul. Thank you very much. Florida State probably a notch too high. Surprised you didn't just throw them in at